None of us are perfect. Let's all remember that. We're talking UCF football. We got Jeff Sharon on the line from Black and Gold Banneret to talk up the Knights taking on Cincinnati in a huge Friday night affair. I will not miss a play of this game. There's no question about it. When we talk Group of Five football, Cincinnati is on board as one of the better teams, and obviously UCF is recent past king of the Group of Five. Jeff, how you doing today?
Doing well. It's weird having a 1 in the L column during the regular season. We haven't seen that in 3 years.
I know it. This day was going to come. We've talked about it. It was going to come.
Yep.
But coming back from 21-0 against Pitt, and I caught the fourth quarter of the game, and then you just probably had to figure with so much confidence in this team and in this program and coaching staff that even though it was a tight one, that things would be good once you came back and took the lead.
Yeah, it was. Let me give you a little. You got to give Pitt a ton of credit for that game a couple weeks back. They kind of did the UCF to UCF, jumped on them early, caused a couple turnovers. Even though they didn't cash in on those turnovers, they also got a special teams touchdown. They were up 21-0, like you said. And then UCF did what we've come to expect from UCF, which is starting in the third quarter, they scored 31 points in 13 minutes and 30 seconds, and actually had a 10-point lead on Pitt. And then, again, credit to Pitt, they were able to sort of withstand that. They had a critical drive where they got help from some really dumb UCF penalties on defense. UCF had a 4th and 2 in the red zone that they went for and did not get, and that set up the situation where in the final 4 minutes, UCF was up just 1 score rather than 2, and Pitt drove down, and even so, still needed a trick play on a 4th down with 1 minute to go to beat UCF by 1 point. So that's and that handed UCF their first regular season loss since 2016, since the Obama administration, if you can believe that. Knights recovered pretty well last week against UConn. Of course, UConn is usually the medicine that you would want to have after a tough loss on the road. UConn at home, so another 56-point game for UCF last week, and here we are with their biggest game of the conference season to this point, and one that we've had circled on our calendar for a while.
Jeff Sharon on the line from Black and Gold Banneret. Join him on SB Nation to track UCF football and athletics overall. Of course, MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation. Of course, I was looking forward to UCF Stanford. That didn't turn out to be quite the affair that we anticipated during the preseason. UCF dominant in that game. A lot of attention toward that game, but still other games being played at the time, 6, 7 other games on TV. So people's attention diverted. The same thing with the Pitt game, even though I'm sure a lot of people like me dove in on the fourth quarter and looked at that. There's obviously competition on Saturday, but if you love college football nation is going to be locked in on this game against Cincinnati, and a lot of people will see UCF for the first time in 2019. So Jeff, if you can kind of get us caught up on what the narrative is, both sides of the ball, what's working, what's not working, what's been a concern, and what has been pretty much standard UCF fare over the last few years.
Well, this is a massive game for UCF, and certainly the biggest one, because remember, UCF's goal every year at this point is get to the New Year's Six Bowl as the Group of Five conference representative. And remember that the rule is it's not necessarily the highest ranked Group of Five team. It's the highest ranked Group of Five conference champion. So it doesn't matter where you're ranked. If you don't win your conference, you're not getting that ticket to the big bowl and the big payday that comes with it. So this is a big game for UCF. It's a divisional game within the East in the American Athletic Conference. And the Knights are going into a hostile environment that's more or less going to be the equivalent of what Cincinnati went into last year. Remember, last year when these two teams played, it was in Orlando. ESPN College Game Day came to UCF for the very first time that weekend, and Cincinnati was more or less a bit player in UCF's national coming out party. Cincinnati knows that. I think they're well prepared for the game. Luke Fickell has done wonders with that program since he took over for Tommy Tuberville. And this is going to be a big challenge on the road for UCF, starting a true freshman quarterback in Dillon Gabriel. Granted, he started every game since FAU, which was the second game of the year, including the Pitt loss. I think he learned a lot from that, too, because he made a lot of real freshman mistakes that are easy to pick out on tape. And he's a super smart kid. He'll be able to figure that out. But there's going to be a wave of emotion for Cincinnati heading into this. Offensively for UCF, like we said before, their key is going to be take the air out of the building right away, score early, get a stop or a turnover, score again, put them down 10, 14, 17, nothing right out of the gate, and take the air out of the building. And once you do that, then you can kind of control the line of scrimmage a little bit more, something they failed to do against Pitt for the first time in a long time against an opponent, is failed to control the line of scrimmage on offense and get guys like Adrian Killens and Greg McCrae moving in the run game. And then obviously for Dillon Gabriel to pick his spots and hit, that opens up the play action so you can hit Gabriel Davis, who's emerged this over the latter part of last season into the season, has emerged as a surefire NFL prospect. And if you haven't seen UCF yet, make sure you keep an eye on number 13 on the outside, because he is going to be a star. And on defense, the situation for UCF is make sure you control Desmond Ridder, keep him in the pocket, the Cincinnati quarterback, who's very talented, a dual threat guy. Keep him in the pocket, try and stop Michael Warren, especially on third downs, because Cincinnati's actually not too bad on converting third downs so far. And get the ball to the offense in good field position, which they were able to do last week against Connecticut, made the offense's life a lot easier. And that's how UCF scored 56 points in 40 minutes against UConn. So it's going to be a tough test, obviously, for UCF. I think a tougher one than maybe UCF fans want to admit, especially given the emotion of the atmosphere out there. But it's certainly one it's not impassable for the Knights to do. And if they do, they'll have the inside track to the East Division once again.
We deliver previews on Week 6 across the board, all the big matchups, including UCF at Cincinnati on Friday night. We got Jeff Sharon on the line from Black and Gold at Banneret on SB Nation. Please join my weekly predictions. They're down in the description section below. Hashtag next to, actually the link next to Voice of College Football Community. So with Dillon Gabriel at the controls in what has been one of the more prolific offenses in the country for the past 3 seasons, are there any noticeable differences in how the offense is called, run, approach?
It's a lot more of a Josh Heupel-ish system. You know, when he came here in the wake of Scott Frost leaving for Nebraska, Josh Heupel's offensive scheme was a little bit different than what Frost was running. Frost was a lot more lateral, a little bit more in terms of short passing game and opening up seams. Josh Heupel likes to run the ball a little bit more out of that quick set. Remember, UCF's bread and butter is getting to the line quickly in that no huddle. They're literally, if you remember the book about the Phoenix Suns, 7 seconds or less, 7 seconds is too long for UCF in between plays. They try and keep it down close to 6 or even 5 if they can, and snap the ball at around 35. So with Dillon Gabriel in, it's a little bit more of an emphasis on the run game, and then he is accurate and strong-armed enough where UCF can attack downfield. They love the vertical passing game much more than the lateral passing game under Josh Heupel. So he's the right guy to kind of run this offense. If you could cook up a kid in a science lab to run Josh Heupel's offense, I think Dillon would be it. That said, you know, there's still all the same talent around the ball. We mentioned Adrian Killens and the fastest man in college football who had a breakout run last week against UConn from 75 yards. Greg McCrae, who's more or less a change of pace back, but he's not Kevin Mack or anything. Like he has breakaway speed. And Otis Anderson has found a really good spot in the offense this year. The running back / wide receiver. He's the only guy with that designation on the roster. and he is getting open downfield in the passing game. We saw him return a punt against Pitt for a touchdown last week in spectacular fashion, or not last week, but the week before. And it's just an embarrassment of weapons that Dillon Gabriel has at his disposal to go to, especially in big situations and like third downs.
To your point, UCF having given up 9 sacks thus far this season, 19 all of last season. The sack statistic can be misleading, but I think that somewhat points to some concerns along the offensive front. Michael Pitts for Cincinnati, one of the top sack artists in the conference with 4. And with all the gadgets, all the speed, all the spacing, it can all go awry if you don't block the guys up front. So that would seem to be Cincinnati's one main hope. Not that they're a huge underdog at 4 points, but in terms of disrupting the offense and bringing UCF down to earth.
Yeah, it has a little bit of a concern, especially after what we saw Pitt do to UCF, where they were able to pressure not so much around the outside, but up the middle. And they were able to get their interior guys into Dillon Gabriel's face. They forced him to throw a couple interceptions. He was seeing some things that weren't quite there. And that had a real effect on the game later, especially early when Pitt got that big lead. UCF threw the ball to them twice on interceptions. The only thing is Pitt didn't convert those turnovers and still scored the first 21 points of the game anyway. One of the things that I think UCF is going to have to do is tighten up the offensive line play. I think that, talking to the offensive linemen as we have after that Pitt game, they know that they know what they had to do. I think they all came out of there with sort of the same thing. They're saying there's something about that game up there that just didn't feel right when we were coming out. We don't know what it is, whether it was complacency or what, but something didn't feel right. And they know that this is a big moment for them coming into Pitt. And these guys this is a veteran group. They've been around the block. Jordan Johnson was on that team that went 13-0. He's the center and is the anchor of that offensive line, and is a truly beloved player on the roster, one of the top leaders. And he will be he and the other guys like Parker Boudreaux and Jake Brown, they will be ready for Friday night. I think they thought that they were responsible for the Pitt loss, and they take that kind of stuff personally. So I'm expecting them to have a very good game on Friday night.
Well, especially as an 18 to 21-year-old who, even if you're trying to take care of business, be responsible, respect your opponent, do all those right things, there has to be something, just a tinge in the back of your mind when you step on the field against an opponent that I believe they beat 51-14 the previous season. Yeah. That maybe it's, we're going to have to play here for about a half, but everything should be fine. And maybe they're a little bit better, and maybe we'll only win by 3 touchdowns. Maybe there's something back there, but now once you get that gut check, now that they can reset and they've got another quality opponent this time on the road, a team that they outdistanced in the fourth quarter, but definitely gave them a challenge at home last year that may gain a little bit more attention from them. And obviously it's a conference game as well. Last thing for you, Jeff, unless you think there's anything, certainly with your knowledge, once we grab you and get you on here, I don't want to let anything go that you think needs to be said, but I'm just thinking of the typical college football fan who's going to check in on this game, checks in on UCF a few times a year, obviously checked out the scores and knows what they're about. But there's kind of a perception that, well, this is the team that runs away from everyone in the group of 5, scores a ton of points, ton of speed. Then they run up against an LSU. Maybe they get pushed around a little bit and they can't keep up from that standpoint. And here we're checking in again against Cincinnati. How would you compare this 2019 version from the 2 previous regular season undefeated versions of UCF football?
Yeah, I'm hard-pressed to say that they are top to bottom better than those 2 teams, because those two teams had Mackenzie Milton, and he was a magician back there. Now, in this case, UCF is starting Dillon Gabriel at quarterback, like we mentioned before, who's kind of really is actually Mackenzie Milton's mini-me. They actually both went to the same exact high school, Miliani High School in Hawaii. Dillon's actually, I think, a better passer than Mackenzie at this point in his career, which is actually fairly scary to think about. But he is still a true freshman. He has a lot of weapons at his disposal, although, the last couple of years, UCF has had guys like Dredrick Snelson, who actually left early for the NFL draft, but did not get drafted, which was kind of a bummer. I think Snelson would have been a big boon to UCF this year. What would have been his senior season. That said, there's still a lot of, like you said, there's still a lot of talent on there. I'm hesitant to say that they're better than last year's team, at least at the end, after McKenzie got hurt and Daryl Mack came in. But we'll have to see. This performance on Friday could go a long way to sort of giving us a little bit more data on that. And I think one of the other things that's fairly interesting to keep an eye on here before we go, for those fans who are checking in, you guys remember Daryl Mack last year against Memphis in the conference championship game, had the rough first half, but then ran for a school record 4 touchdowns in the second half. Obviously, we know how good of a running threat he is. Dylan Gabriel was a little hesitant on the run side of the option game, especially against Pitt. We talked about that 4th and 2. We kind of broke that down on our own post game after that game. But I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if we see Daryl Mack come out in some short yardage and goal line situations, a la what Tim Tebow did in his freshman year when Chris Leak was a senior, and Florida won the national title that year. I would not be surprised to see a little bit more of Daryl Mack in short yardage because of the running threat that he poses. In addition to being a pretty good passer, he was always underrated as a passer, I thought. And so far this year is hitting over 65% of his relatively limited opportunities. And Brandon Wimbush is actually being moved over to wide receiver now this year. Remember the Notre Dame transfer who started the first game at quarterback. We'll see him probably lining up outside. So that should be pretty interesting. Another chance for UCF to get him on the field. So I don't know. There's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of options at UCF's disposal, but we might see the optimum situation for UCF in this game because I think they know that how big this is. I think Josh Heupel knows how big this game is. I know Randy Shannon does on the defensive side of the ball. And they want to not just win to solidify their standings in the American East, but make a statement to the rest of the league that don't you forget about us. I know we lost the game by 1 point on the road against an ACC opponent, but we mean business around here, and we expect to defend the crown a 3rd straight time.
All right. It's UCF and Cincinnati should be a good one on a Friday night all by itself, basically, on the college football schedule. So got to check that one out. Jeff Sheeran from Black and Gold Banneret, SB Nation's platform for UCF, stopping by on a regular basis to lay down the law on UCF, and it's always a great discussion. Jeff, we appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for having me again, Mark. Enjoy the game on Friday.